Begin the current Daf, the second is Eruvin Daf, to begin on the bottom line of Chavazayim Rabbeis. The Gemara is in the middle of a discussion explaining the halachas of Meiser, what you could purchase with, which also relates to the laws of Eruv, regarding if you know it from a klal prat klal or ribui mut and ribui. Ashes kospat b'kalzik and echeskel ta'anitam daf. I'm pretty sure everyone's joining us for today's daf. Some of the things you can speak about, as like we mentioned, regarding the monies of Meiser Sheni. What is it that you could purchase with those monies? Additionally, we're going to be discussing regarding different types of foods, and each one of these are specifically some of the items we're going to be mentioning regarding car, hearts, or palm. Regarding these items, could they be used for an Eruv? And additionally, how much is necessary to be considered an Eruv, which is 2 meals worth of these items. Now, we had mentioned in the previous daf that by way of a klal prat klal, which foods may be purchased with Meiser Sheni money. The first price that we had quoted was said that pri b'gidulei karka. All those items mentioned in the pasuk, bakar and tzoin and yain and shecher, they have two criteria. One, it reproduces from its own seed, pri, and it's also gidulei karka, it's nourished by the ground. The second price add on a third criteria, and it's also vlad b'za'aretz, which is something generated from the ground. So we had quoted in the previous daf that my benai, what's the difference between these two different prices? They're both saying klal prat klal. So Abai had said, and this is where we're going to be continuing on today's daf, dogamig benai. He said, the difference between them is fish. According to the first price, fish are nourished from the ground, and therefore it's going to be included in what you could buy with Meiser Sheni money. The second price would exclude fish because it's created from water, it's not created from the ground. That's why Gemara continues and says, no, this quotation of Abai saying that fish would be the difference because they're gidulei karka, they're nourished from the ground, and therefore according to the first price would be included, must be an inaccurate quotation. Why? As the Gemara continues, Mi or Mabaya, we're on the bottom line of Chavazayim base. Does Abai really say Gidogim that fish are gidulei karka? They grow from the ground, and therefore, since they grow from the ground, the first price would hold that they're included what you could purchase Meiser Sheni. It's only the second price says you need vlad, so would exclude fish. But Vama Abai says you continue to have a chesed alav achol patisa. Someone eats an aquatic sheret, a small little bug that grows in the water. It's not even the size of an olive. But still, since it's a creature, it's considered as consumption, as eating something that's usr, a sheret that's forbidden to be eaten. Like a arba, he gets 4 lashes. Now, why 4 lashes? So Rashi explains, every sheret hamayim gets 4 lashes, and Patis is one of these examples, because the Brisa brings in Teres Kainim, it says in the pasuk, Al teshak tzus nafshei seichem b'chol hasheretz hasheretz, and it says, B'leisid tamubam. That's 2 lav. Then in that lav, it just says any sheretz, including that lav is a sheretz ha'aretz, whether it's a sheretz that grows from the ground, or a sheretz ha'mayim, an aquatic sheretz. Now, then there's another pasuk, a third pasuk, says, Mibsarim lo yiseichel, don't eat from their flesh. And it says, V'chol ha'she'en li snabit v'kaskeshes lo yiseichel, whatever does not have skins and scales, which that's, fins and scales, which that's a sheretz, you're going to get, there's a prohibition. So there's 4 lav that a person gets if he eats an aquatic sheretz. Now, an amala, let's eat an ant, which is a sheretz ha'aretz, it's a small little creature that's on the ground, like a chamesh. It gets 5 lashes. 2 are from the general issa that we mentioned before, includes every sheretz. And then you have that's a third lav, it's if it crawls on the ground. Then there's that's 4. And there's another pasuk that's 5. You have 2 of the general and 3 that specific lav and mentioned Torah, a sheretz that goes on the ground, and all in Parshas Shemini. Sirah, if he eats a hornet, which is a sheretz ha'ayif, and a hornet flies, it's a sheretz that flies, then like a sheish, he gets 6 malchus. 5 is because it's a sheretz ha'aretz, because a hornet also crawls on the ground. A 6th one that gets added on because b'chol sheretz ha'ayif sheketzu lo yoichel, which it says in Mishnah Torah. Now Rashi addresses, although there's a pasuk in Parashat Kedushin that says b'leisis shakshus nafesh seichem b'heim b'ayif b'chol shetirmos, maybe that shouldn't be another lot. Says Rashi, no, that's not included because that's actually referring to large animals that are just not kosher, and not by shratzim, because it doesn't say sheretz, it says sheketz. Sheretz is when something that crawls on the ground, it's not visible only because it crawls so small. That's what's included in the lav. But be that as it may, that's what the Abayat said. Abayat said this teaching that when you eat these non-kosher water creature, you're going to get the 2 general malchus of shratzim in general, plus the 2 of sheretz hamayim, making a total of 4. Says the Gemara ben Isa. Now, if it would be true that you quoted Abayat as saying that fish are gidulei karka, fish quote unquote grow from the ground because they're sustained from the ground. So patisa nami lukum mishum hasheretz ala oretz. Then the aquatic sheretz should get lashes also for the sheretz that's from the ground. You should get 7 lashes. 5 of sheretz ha'aretz with another 2 of sheretz hamayim, because you tell me that aquatic creatures are gidulei karka. They somehow grow from the ground. So it should be a sheretz al ha'aretz. Rather, apparently, that fish are not considered as nourished from the ground. So Rava Elam Ravina gives a different interpretation. He says that actually, and this is really what we had said in the previous daf. If you recall, we had said the difference between the Manda Amar and Amar Aleph from the previous daf, that they had said the only thing we're excluding is fish brine or maybe salt and water, but fish are included, and they darshan ribi meute. And we said that, but then there's other Tanoim that they expounded klal prat to klal, that we said they're going to be excluding fish. That's according to this Maskana Ravina. Because actually, you're right, both brises that say pri and geduli karaka, or it also has to be vlad v'adus aretz, oifis given out. The difference between those two brises is actually birds, fowl, not fish. Fish, you're right, they are excluded. They're not similar because they're not geduli karka. Fish are not geduli karka, and it has to be geduli karka. All those criterion of the specifics were geduli karka. So, and that says the Gemara, the difference between them is birds. Lamandam, according to one who says that, like the first bryce said, geduli karka, all you have to have is two characteristics. One has to be a derivative from a derivative, and has to grow from the ground. So, birds, they sustain from the ground, they eat from the ground, and they come from a mother bird, and so on and so forth. Lamandam of vlad zars, but according to the second bryce, it had to have also, that has to be born from, that has to be generated from the ground. These birds, just like we said, that fish was created from water, birds are actually from the mud. That's how in Sheish and Bereshis, birds are actually they're half in the air and half in the ground. That's what mud is, somewhere in the middle. That's where they were created from, but ultimately they're not created from the ground, and therefore that would be the difference between those two brises. But again, both of them would hold that fish would be excluded. Now the Gemara just says, so man de marbi oifes my time. What's the reason of the one who includes birds? Man de mamait oifes my time. What's the one who excludes birds? In other words, you're telling me that there's a third criterion that's going to be different if you're including birds or not. Why does one require the third criterion, and why does the first bryce not require the third criterion? Which again, birds are the difference. Why is that? Why does one say that you need, and why does they say you're not? Says the Gemara, because man de marbi oifes, the one who includes birds, he holds that wherever you have a klal prat to klal, it's an interesting concept. Says that klal basra dafka. The primary is the second general statement, and that's really what you're going on. So essentially, we're breaking apart. It's a klal prat to klal, but klal prat to klal in it. And if you say karbonis every morning, you say klal prat is prat to klal. There's different things. If you break apart the klal prat to klal, these two man de amrim, they disagree. Which one's really the primary? Is it really klal prat and just happens to have a klal at the end, or is it really prat to klal and just happens to have a klal in the beginning? So that's going to be the difference between these two different interpretations. The one who includes birds, who says you don't need to have vlad aretz because he holds klal basa dafka. The primary is the second klal. So therefore, it's like a prat to klal. It's really like a specific with a general statement. So nasa klal moisav al prat. So that means that the klal is actually coming to add on more than what was said in the specific. And therefore, that actually, we actually would include everything. Because that's a prat to klal, right? Prat to klal, what's the teaching has the exact words again. But basically, everything is included from the second klal. Now, but what's with the first klal? There is a first klal. It's still a klal prat to klal. That's coming to exclude and to say that whatever is going to be, we're going to say ein b'chlal mashma prat. We're not going to include anything more that the first klal is coming to exclude, and to say that we're going to expound this klal prat ein b'chlal al mashma prat. We're not going to include anything more, that we're not going to go after the klal. However, the prat is going to help a little bit to say that when you're including the last klal, you're not including everything, rather ke'ena prat. That's what this mandam is saying. And the Gemara explains. V'hani klal l'kama, the first rule helps. L'mu'ute kol telei damei le'mishnei tzadin, whatever is not similar from two sides. So again, if you didn't have the first klal, it would be a prat to klal. Prat to klal, you would include everything. It's moisav ala prat. Now, but you have a first klal, which is, you're saying it's not just a prat to klal. So that means it has to be ke'ena prat. But it's ke'ena prat, that's like from two tzaddim, like we're saying, it has to be prima pri, and it has to be geduli karka. So including also birds from that halacha, because birds are prima pri in the geduli karka. What would we excluding? We're excluding fish, which is not similar even on one of those two, because it's not prima pri, and it's not geduli karka. So it doesn't have anything similar, so we're going to exclude it. But Uman might, except for the one who's excluding the birds, he's going to hold that wherever you have a klal prat, klal kamadaf. The primary is the first klal. Oh, so if the primary is the primary's first klal, so essentially what it's like is like klal prat. It's really like a klal on the prat. Now that is the b'chal mashma prat. All you have is what's in the specific, because that's the last thing that you said. It's like, okay, we're not really including everything in general statement. The general statement is like an introduction for the prat, hani, and only what was specified, midachin yalai. Anything else is not going to be like that. And then we're going to actually exclude everything, even what's similar to the prat. So that's what it would be. But for Hani Klal Basa, but then when you add on subsequently the second klal, that's coming to exclude from the miyat of the first klal by a little bit, the Rebbe called the Dami La Mishleishin Stam. So we're going to include, but not as much as we include if it was like the other mandama. It has to be at least similar to the specific and 3 different correct criteria. It has to be pre, Gedoli Karka, it has to be Vlad Vlad Sa'aretz. Now Vlad Vlad Aretz would come to exclude that of Eifers, because Eifers are not born, they're not generated from the ground, they were from Merakak, from the mud, and therefore that's the difference between these two Manda Amrim. They're both from the Klal Brother Klal, not Reba and Reba as we said in the previous Manda Amrim from the previous stuff. So they're going to be excluding fish, but machlekes regarding if excluding birds or not will be dependent on how you learn Klal Prat Klal. Is the primary the first Klal? So if the primary is first Klal, then Klal Prat is a Klal al Mashal Prat. You're only including what's in the specific, and that's all you would include. But the second Klal comes to add on a little bit more as long as it's on the 3 tzdadim. It has 3 criteria, which is not adding that much because it has to share 3 similar characteristics. But if it's a prat and klal, if that's the primary thing, so then you're including everything. Prat and klal is you add on everything because the klal is the last thing. So then, but the first klal comes to exclude that. Okay, as long as it's similar in 2 criteria, I mean, it doesn't have to have so much that's similar to that. That's the difference between them, and different birds are going to be the difference between those 2 different manda amrim. But again, like I said, both of them are excluding fish, and the ribu are including fish. That's what we said the difference between those. Now we go back to this halacha regarding what's fit to be used as food for an Eruv, which is going to relate back to the halacha of the Mishnah. With Mishnah, we open up a kol ma'arvin to use everything for an Eruv. We're going to come and qualify that now. Amar b'hud mishmei Rav Shmuel b'ashilas mishmei Rav says ma'arvin you can make a rubit techumen b'papuin, which is some type of an herb that's called kukuli, like Rashi says in Aramaic, and chalag bloigers, and with purslane, and uvugud gamias, and with coriander, because these are things that are fit to be eaten. Avaloi, it says we're going to actually go through a lot of these different items that Rav says and asking them. Avaloi b'chaziz, but not with what's called green grain, which is like many times the Gemara calls it shachas. It's like when the grain is still green and it's not really ripe yet, they would cut it down and eat it. You cannot use that for an erev. You also cannot use bad dates which didn't fully mature yet. That was the 5 cases Rav said. 3 of them he said are valid for an erev, and 2 of them he said are not valid for an erev. Now the Gemara asks and takes apart some of the cases. First case we had said with gani of mima arvin. Is that really true that Rav says that you can make an erev with coriander? Well, in the Brisa that says good gani is which actually diminishes a person's semen. So merubi ban if someone has a lot of kids, let him eat the coriander because Kippur is not going to have kids. Chasuchi ban lo yechelu. Someone does not have any kids, he shouldn't be eating coriander because it's going to deplete his semen. Now, if the stalk got hard like a piece of wood, lezera, that the seeds already started sprouting in it. Even though someone has a lot of children, shouldn't be eating it because it's harmful for the person. It's hard. So the Gemara wonders, says, wait a second, how can you say coriander is something that could use in the air, but it's not something that's edible? People don't usually eat it. So the Gemara has 3 different interpretations. Targuma, so you could explain that what it's talking about is that what are we talking about over here that Rav said you can make an air with it is ashaloi hukshu lazera. We're talking about where it didn't become so hard yet that the seed started sprouting in it. And the one who's making the air is a merubi b'banim. He's someone that has a lot of children already. So it's fit for him. Because we said the only problem then when it's not hard yet is just that it's going to deplete the semen count. We don't care because the sperm count because he already has children. So that's one interpretation. V'bay say moreover you want, you could say that actually no, we've been talking about someone that doesn't have children. But what do you mean? It's not something that he would eat. It's not considered no, because it is fit for someone that has a lot of children. As the Gemara proves, didn't we learn the halacha that Mishnah that said ma'arvin l'nazar b'yayin? You can make an erev for a nazar with wine. Uli yisrael b'truma or for yisrael b'truma. Now why? We see avagav b'chazi lahai. You know it's not fit for him. Chaz lahai, it's fit for someone else. And so it's as long as it's fit for somebody, it's good for an erev. So chanami here also avagav b'chaz lahai, even though it's not fit for him, chaz lahai, it's fit for someone that has a lot of children, and therefore it would be viable to use as an erev. Or a third approach, if you want, you could say kikam rab. When did Rab say you can make an erev with coriander? Is a certain type. Being dakuke madai. We're talking about the coriander of madai, of meat, where they're very good, high quality, and therefore people would eat them, and therefore it's not a contradiction. It's a harmless type of coriander, and that's why he said that you can make an erev with coriander. Now the next case that Rab had said was the bechazizloi. He had said that no, you cannot make a erev with green grain. And that the Gemara has from another teaching of Rab, Amar Rav. he says kishus regarding hops, the chaziz and this green grain, ma'arvin behen, you could make an air with it, and umevarchen lein bar pri adam, and you make a bar pri adam on it because it grows from the ground. And we'll actually ask on that part of halacha too. But one thing is, you see a chaziz, you could make an air with it. Why did Rav's first teacher say you cannot? So the Gemara says, loikash, it's not difficult. Hamak made the asur Rav lebavel. When did he say you cannot make an air with it? It was before he came to Bavel. Halabasa the asur Rav lebavel. Sometimes when the Rav came to Bavel, in Bavel they would eat green grain. So when Rav came to Bavel, they saw people eat it. He says, you could use it and make an air. But originally he had said you could not make an air with it. And that says the Gemara.
So it all depends. If it's all the machalodom.
Yeah. So that's what the Gemara is going to ask right now. But Bavel have a Eruvin Daf? What, was Bavel the majority of the world? Like what, because in Bavel they eat green, that only makes it that's something that's an edible thing? But Tanya learned the Brisa that says we don't go based on someone who is not doing like the majority of the world. The Brisa says hapul regarding beans, vasaira and barley, vatilson and fenugreek, shazar in the yard. Let's say somebody planted it because he wants to eat it in a vegetation state as a vegetable. Barley grows in the vegetation. Now he doesn't want to eat the barley kernels. He wants to eat the vegetable that it grows in. So says the Brisa, we say his intention is nullified regarding mankind. Therefore, actually, the halacha becomes like this: Zera and Chayiv. The seeds are actually going to be obligated in Meiser, even though he didn't plant it for the seeds. He wanted it for the vegetable. Doesn't make a difference. And actually, the Yark and Potter, the vegetable is going to be exempt because that's not significant. When you're planting the fenugreek or the beans, you're not eating it for the vegetable. There's a plant, right? And out of the plant comes seeds. So, but even though he planted because he wants the vegetable, that's not going to be Chayiv Meiser, and the seeds are going to be. Now, and so to Hashachalayim regarding cress, Vagarger and a garden rocket, which these are eaten both the seeds and the vegetable, the vegetation, the plant, Shazar and Liyark. So if he plants it for a vegetable, still Masas and Liyark Vizar, you're going to have to take Meiser on the vegetable and on the seeds. And so do the opposite. Zar and Lazar, if you plant it for the seeds, Masas and Zar Liyark, you're going to have to give Meiser on the seed and on the Yark, because that's both are valid eaten parts. It doesn't make it what your intention was. But one thing is, from the first part of the Brisa you see, that we don't consider this person who's doing what most people don't want to do. He's planning, I want the vegetable. I don't want to care about the barley that I can have the grain. I want to eat the vegetable that the barley grows on. So, we don't go based on what you're thinking. The mice is going to be on the zera, on the seed, not on the vegetable. So therefore that basically says, so you can't say that when Rav came to Bavel, he saw people eating, he changed his mind. Oh, in Bavel I say they eat it. Yeah, but that's not enough to consider, because the whole world, they don't eat green grain. So how could that make it, in places discusses regarding a place or an individual, but that's what the Gemara has explained, that we don't go based on that. So how could that be a good answer? So the Gemara says, right, a different approach. Kikama Rav, when did Rav say you can make an air with chaziz, with green grain, as a tin tamid base, is bidinun yasa. We talk about the type of green grain that grows in the garden. That type of green grain, the garden variety, that's eaten everywhere, and that's where he said you can make an air. When he said chaziz cannot be eaten as an Erev, that was talking about the other type of chaziz, and therefore that's why it's not a contradiction with Rav. Now the Gemara just asked, Zera Garger, and the Brisa had mentioned that the Garger seed is going to have a chiva maisa. So it's Gemara, we're running the seed of it. Lamai chaz, what's the seed fit? You're telling me that the Yerik and the Zera are going to have to take maisa on it. What can you use the seed for? So I'm going to say, Shekim Rishayim, the early one, Shalahayla and Pilpal, they didn't have pepper. Sheikhtin, they used to grind down the garger seed, and matbilum ma'isatali, and they would go ahead and dip the roast inside of it. So therefore, you see that it does have utility for eating, and therefore there's chiv meiser on the garger seed. Now, continuing, we actually had mentioned on the Amid Aleph that in Rav's teaching, that regarding hops and chaziz and green grain, we said that you could make an air with it, and you also make a bracha b'or pri adam. So regarding that part of the halacha, the Gemara brings the following teaching. Reb Zera, when he was weak from learning, so he wanted to still fulfill a mitzvah. What he did was have a ozl b'yasel a pischad Rabbi Yehuda bar Ami. He would sit outside the yeshiva Rabbi Yehuda bar Ami. He said to himself, "Kinafik v'ali rabbanon." When the rabbis come out, at least I'll stand up for them. I'll get reward for standing up for a Talmudic scholar. So I have no kaiches to learn. At least let me get schal. Sit outside yeshiva and I'll stand up and Talmud Chacham. So Nafik asik yenuka de beirav. So he was sitting outside, and out came a young student of the yeshiva, and Amalei says, "My Agmar Rabbah, what did your Rebbe teach you?" So Amalei says, he taught me the following halacha: Kishuz hops. The halacha is that it's boyer pri adam. It's going to be a boyer pri adam. Grows from the ground, it's mi adama. Chaziz, which is shalchas, is shahakol nimidvar. You can make a shahakol on the green grain. So that Amalei said to Madrab, to the contrary, logic would tell you the opposite. Hi, the chaziz, the green grain, ma'ar kamarbi, that grows from the ground. That should be bar pradama. V'hai, and the hops, ma'avir kamarbi. It actually grows from the ear, because hops grow on top of thorn bushes, and it's not rooted on the ground. It grows from the thorn bush, and if it's actually growing, nourishing from the ear space.
But the bush is nourishing from the ground.
Oh, so that's what the Gemara is going to say. Oh. But it seems like that he held that no, it's not. But it's still in itself is not growing from the ground.
Fruit like this.
No, in other words, because like let's say mushrooms, right? Mushrooms also.
Mushrooms is different.
We make a shahakal.
It's only stick to the ground, but it's not nourishing from the ground.
It's a fungus.
Right.
It's a fungus or whatever.
Right.
But it's not nourishing from the ground.
Right. That's what the Gemara is going to say.
But every fruit like this.
That what?
It's connected to a branch, and the branch is to the tree, the tree from the ground.
Right, but this is a separate entity. This is not like the branch, the tree grows, and that's migufa ilan. Here it's a separate entity that's on top of it, and it grows from that. So, in the Chanami, but that's what the Gemara is going to say. The Gemara says that, hops grow from the ear. But it says the Gemara, no, it's like that young yeshiva student, that Allah follows like him. So the Gemara, my time, what's the reason? Doesn't he have a good point, Reb Zera? Says the Gemara, no. The reason is the hops, Gemara peri. It's the final product, so it's called a pre, so you can make bari pri hadama. But the green grain, lav gemar peri, it's not the finished product. So you can't say bari pri hadama, it's not the pre. So since it's not the final product, you can make a shakal maybe before. Now, why the comment this that you had asked and said, hi ma'ar karavi, Reb Zera had a point. He says, what do you mean? But the hops grow from the green grain grows from the ground, that should be hadama, but we say, okay, you can't make hadama because it's not pre. But we said the hops, they get the nourishment is from the ear because they grow on top of thorn bushes. And that says the Gemara, Allah, it's not the case. No, hops also grow from the ground. Because his muscle, when we cut down the thorn bush, and then the hops they die. Obviously, if it wasn't nourishing from the ground, it wouldn't grow, and therefore that's why we say that it is ultimately nourishing from the ground. Therefore, we could call it as a bai pradama. Now the Gemara continues and says that we had mentioned in Rav's teaching that ubekafnias, he said regarding bad immature dates, he said emar, that you cannot make an eighth. That's the Gemara, but in the Brisa that says regarding kur, regarding hearts of palm, the halacha is that hearts of palm is something that gets added onto the palm tree every single year, and before it reaches the winter months, and then it gets hard like a branch. And before it gets hard, it's called kar. And it's good to eat, hearts of palm. So halacha is like this, says the Brisa. Nikich bekesed meiser, it could be purchased with meiser funds, because kar is a prima pri, and it's gedula karka, grows from the ground, and it comes from something from a previous source. Now, ve'ematama tumas oichlin. However, it's not going to have tumas of oichlin, because even if you thought that you want to eat the hearts of palm, it's not considered a food item, because ultimately it gets hard, like it's really part of the tree. So it's not considered as a meiser. Now, you could use it as a meiser, because you could eat it. But it's not going to be considered as a oichel to have the halach of tumas oichel. Now, the kafnias, and this is where we're asking the Gemara's question. Regarding kafnias, these immature dates, nikchas bekesed meiser, it can be purchased with the meiser funds. Umetamas tumas oichel. It's going to have tumas of oichel. So this is where the question is going to be from. You see, everyone agrees it's metamas tumas oichel. How can you say that you can't make an erev with it if it's considered oichel? And so to Yehuda, he says regarding kur, he says regarding the hearts of palm, he says actually harei ka'etz l'chol dvar. He says actually consider it as wood for all its halachas. It's just that it can be purchased with the meiser sheni funds, which the Gemara is going to ask. Well, that's essentially the same thing as the Tanakh. But it says the Gemara b'kafnias and the unripe dates harei kapri l'chol dvar. It's considered like a fruit for all its purposes. It's just that it's potter from meiser. This is not talking about meiser sheni. It's talking about it's exempt from meiser. Meiser is only when you have Gemara Malacha, when you finish the pre-finished its production. Here, since it wasn't Gemara Malacha, it's still immature, so it's not going to have the obligation of taking up your Meisers. Meiserishin, not going to have obligation for that. Now, according to Tanakama, that he would hold actually that it is chayiv the Meiser, because he said for all halachic purposes, it's considered as a pre. Okay, that's the machlekes of Yehuda and Tanakama. But one thing is, what the Gemara is bringing this in for, we learned in the Brisa that says that the kafne is going to have tumas eichlin. It's going to have the tummy of food items. So wait a second. Obviously, he said it is a eichel, so you should be able to make an error with it. Why is Rav saying b'kavnis ema arvin when in the Brisa word everyone agrees that it's going to have tumas eichel? Says the Gemara, And these few lines are a little bit complicated because a lot of different halachas that are in here. We're just not going to go through every one in detail, but the Gemara will mention a few of them. And we're only bringing it in now because of the question regarding the kafnius, the immature dates. Rabbit said you cannot make an erev, and the Bryce says, what do you mean? It has tumas oichel. It's a oichel. So why can't you make an erev with it? Says the Gemara, no hasam over there that we said in the Bryce that's going to have a tumas oichel. Is we're talking about bin in the schane. We're talking about where there it's from the male palm trees, this female and male palm trees, where they only make immature dates, and they never come out in fully mature dates ever. So the kafnis is the gemar peri, and they actually they go and harvest it in Nisan time. Now that's therefore considered an eichel. When did Rav say that's not going to be considered a food item for an Eruv? Is talking about by the female palm trees. Oh, the kafnis, the immature dates that they will become tomorrow. So therefore they're not fully gemar peri yet. Oh, so therefore that's where it's not considered as an eichel, and there is not a contradiction. But the Gemara rejects this interpretation. You can't say this. Why? Because if that would be the case, then this gets a little complicated. You have to hold the cheshbon of the brisa. But holy Rabbi Yehuda, this is Rabbi Yehuda would say tourism in Amaiser. If you recall, in the brisa, Rabbi Yehuda had said that kafnius is kapri l'chol devreim. It's just that they're putter from Meiser. You don't have to take off Meisers from these kafnius, from these immature dates. It's not finished the Gemara pre. But wait a second. You just told me that what's the brisa talking about? That the Tanakh is saying it's going to have tumas oichel. It's talking about by the female trees. Where the female trees, they only make kafnis and never the Gemara prairie. So you tell me Rabbi Yehuda is going to say that such a kafnis is going to be potter from taking type from it because it's not Gemara pre? But Vatanya in the brisa, this is a brisa in Masechta Shviyas that the Gemara brings in Masechta Pesachim, Perek Markup Shenalgu, when it talks about Shemitah, that you have to liquidate, you have to get rid of all the Shemitah produce. So it says that someone can continue eating from the figs until the Tanakh said until the pagi, the unripe dates of Beisani get used up. Now, Amr Yehuda, he disagrees, says no. Lehoskri pagi Beisani, these figs which are not fully ripened were not mentioned regarding the laws of beer of Shemitah, which is what the Bryce there is talking about. Elin Maisa it's only mentioned regarding the laws of Maisa, which is, as he explains, pagi Beisani, these unripe dates of Beisani or Vahini, which is also a certain type of kafnias, which are immature dates, or the Tavina, which is of this place of Tavina, they're all male palm trees. And therefore, they're always going to be kafnias. And therefore, says Rabbi Yehuda, chayavim a-meiser. They're going to be obligated to meiser because that's the Gemara Pri. Oh, so you see, Rabbi Yehuda holds it is the Gemara Pri, and for sure it's Gemara Pri for all other halachas, and therefore, it would be obligated meiser. So how can you say that the Bryce is talking about that's not difficult on Rav? It's because talking about the female palm trees, and the rest of us, Eichlin, and Rav talking about the male palm trees. The problem is Rabbi Yehuda is in that same Bryce, and he says there's going to be potter from meises. But the problem is, he says elsewhere that you be chayv meisers by these types of kafnias of the male palm trees. So El rather says the Gemara, the truth is we have to say that lav bin nischani. You're right. Obviously, the Bryce is not talking about by the male palm trees, because if that would be the case, we wouldn't understand Rabbi Yehuda. Rather, it's talking about in general. We're talking about the regular palm trees. So how do we resolve the contradiction of Rav? Rav then is the same. Rav was saying that you can't use it for Erev because it's not a food item. The Bryce is saying that it is a food item. Oh no, in Tumas Eichlin. What was the Bryce saying it's considered as a food regarding Tumas Eichlin? That's what kafnis are pre. Oh, that's shani. That's different than the laws of Erev. Why? Why would Erev be different than Tumas Eichlin? It's an Eichel. It's Mekabel Tuma. Why would Erev be different? Says Gemara Kadam Rabbi like Rabbi Yochanan says elsewhere. So we can shortly quote where is this original teaching of Rabbi Yochanan. He says Hoil v'ro l'maskin al de'ar. Since you could go ahead and you could make it edible by putting it over the roasting over the fire, so he could use the same principle of Rabbi Yochanan. Or since you could fix it by roasting over the fire, so even though right now, when it's small, it's going to be bitter, it's still going to be makabel tumah. So therefore, for tumah, and Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with that principle. He wouldn't hold it that smart. But the Tanakh, they're saying that it could be makabel tumah because ultimately it could be considered an eichel. Regarding Eruv, it's not enough that you could make it. For an Eruv, you need something right now that this is my Shabbos residence. And you didn't go ahead and roast it over the fire. So therefore, for Eruv, it's not going to be valid. For Michael, we could look at this, Michael, because you could cook it, you could do something with it. For an Eruv, that's not going to help. Eruv has to be that it's edible right now. Regarding Meiser, we said it's not going to be a pre and it's going to be exempt because it's not a Gemara pay. That's why it's not going to be have the obligation to Meiser.
For a Nozir, I say that wine is good.
For what?
For a Nozir.
Yeah.
You say wine is good.
Because it's good now for other people.
Oh, it's good for
yeah. But here it's not good for anybody, and therefore that's the difference. That's why it's not difficult on Rav. The halacha is like Rav says you cannot use an erev because it's not edible. The reason why the Bryce says it is is because it's Yachal Maskan Adar. And says the Gemara, once we introduced Ve'echet Med Rabbi Yecha, where was Rabbi Yecha the original ruling set on? So Gemara Hadatanya, we're starting the following brisa. Shkedim Hamarim, the bitter almonds, when they're ketanim, when they're small, Sachayavim, then they're obligated meiser. The reason why that is because actually that's the Gemara pre. When they get bigger, they get bitter. They're only edible when they're small. So when they're small, they're chayav meisers. Then when they finally get big, actually they're patur, they're actually being exempt from meisers because then they're not edible. Metukim, the sweet almonds, when they're gedom, when they finally fully ripen, then they're going to be chayavin. Then they're going to be obligated. But when they get time, when they be small, patur, they're going to be exempt because they didn't finish off yet. Now the Gemara actually brings different opinions. Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yisrael, and Shamav, he said the name of his father that actually regarding the bitter almonds, zeh, whether they're big or small, liftur, they're going to be both be exempt. Why? When they're big, they're not edible because they're bitter. When they're small, it's not a pre-yet. So they both are going to be patur. And for Amar, some say note that his father had said zeh chiv. Actually, both are going to be obligated. So Amar B'loi says, Rabbi Chanina had taught in Zipari, that actually both are going to be patur. Like we said, when they're big because they're bitter, when they're small because they're not a gemara pre. But then the Gemara explains, you're the one that says that actually both are chayim, according to that version. How does that make sense? You understand when it's small, you be chayim because that's when it's sweet. When it gets big, how can you say that then be chayim and maishis, it's bitter? Oh, that's what Rabbi that's where the teaching Rabbi Yechanan. However, since you could fix it, you could sweeten it by roasting over the fire, and then it would be edible. And therefore, that's why it's going to be chayv ma'asos even when it's big and it's bitter. And that's the source of that halacha that then we transpose to our sugya that we used to explain regarding the kafnias, why it's going to be kabel tumah, because it's roy lamaskin on dehar. Now, we go back to the brisa that Amamar. The brisa had mentioned that we had Rabbi Yehuda, and he says, kur, regarding hearts of palm, it's considered like a piece of wood for all halachic purposes. The one exception is, your meiser sheni funds, you could use it to buy the hearts of palm because it is edible right now, but for everything else, considered as wood. So that's the same thing as the Tanakama. What did Tanakama said? The word of Tanakama was kur nikach bekesem meiser. He says the hearts of palm could be purchased with the meiser sheni fund, and the emetama to masechet. It's not going to masechet because it's like a piece of wood. He didn't say those words, but that's the same thing like Rabbi Yehuda is saying. So what's the machlekes? Says the Gemara, Amar Abaye, he says the difference between them is that sholkoi, if you stewed it, you cooked it very long, or vitigno, you fried in oil, that would be the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and Tanakama. Why? So Rashi explains. According to Yehuda, even if you stew it or you roast or you deep fry it, it's not going to become tameh because he said it's a piece of wood. You can do whatever you want with wood; it's still not a food item. Tanakama, if you stewed it or you roasted it, fried it, it would become tameh because he didn't say harika eitz. He didn't say those words. So it's not a piece of wood. So if you make it edible by stewing it or by frying it, that would be the difference. But the Gemara rejects this interpretation because Maskal Rav says, is there anyone who would say that shalka b'tigne, that if you stew it or if you fry it, then it's not going to be, we said the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and Tanakama, Rabbi Yehuda would hold it's like a piece of wood, it wouldn't have the halacha as a food item. It's not true. I'll prove to you, Kabul Chaimer, that if you al shalka b'tigne, that everyone would have to hold that it would be considered as neichel. Because the time in the brayso regarding hide of an animal, shiur, or the amniotic sac of an animal, that doesn't have tumas. It's not a food item. It's skin and it's the sac. Now, however, says the brayso, let's say take the hide of the animal and you stew it, you cook it, hours and days and weeks, because there you have to actually do an action. Just thinking about it is not going to be enough. Whereas the other case, the shilya shachishamla, let's say the amniotic sac, that even just thinking about it, that you want to eat it, those two cases would be with tumas eichel. It would have a tumas of eichel because it would be edible. The amniotic sac is edible, which most people don't. But if you think you want it, then it's going to have tumas eichel. And regarding the hide of an animal, if you cook it and you cook it, ultimately it's going to become edible. It's going to become tumas eichel. So if shlika stewing works for hide, sure it's going to work for hearts of palm that was edible originally, and even if it becomes hard, you could go ahead and make a bag. So for sure, everyone would agree to this brayse's halacha or, and for sure you would say regarding hearts of palm that it would be considered that as a food item. So how can you say that that's different between Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakama? So Rabbi gives a different interpretation. Even the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and Tanakama is regarding bracha, regarding making as a bracha. What does that mean regarding a bracha? Tanakama hold you make a very proud dam, because it doesn't say like a piece of wood. It's still something that grows. It's not considered very it's because not the fruit of a tree. It's hadama because it's something that's a vegetation that comes from the ground. According to you, would make a shaka because he said ultimately it's going to become hard like a piece of wood, and therefore you're making a shackle. So although it's edible and it's going to have tumas eichel, but the difference between them is going to be regarding the brach. Ditma, like we learned, is actually machlokes amaram, and this machlokes tanoim mirrors this machlokes amaram. Core regarding hearts of palm, Rabbi Yehuda, not to be confused with Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, he says, "Bay priadam," you make a bay priadam. Shmuel, he says, "You make a shackle." The Gemara explains the reason for these two opinions. Rabbi Yehuda, bay priadam, he says, "You make a bay priadam because uchlu." It's a food item. Hearts of palm people eat. Make a bay priadam, and actually today they have a lot of different opinions regarding hearts of palm, because we'll see is that the intention of what they planted for. But he says, yeah, it's a fruit and make adama. Shmuel, he says, shackle and they make a shackle. Why? Timus should say, well, ultimately this hearts of palm is going to end up being a branch. So let me make a shackle. You make a shackle. It's like a tree. It's like an edible tree. You make a shackle, you're not making a bar adama. Which Shmuel said to Rabbi Yehuda, Shinna, sharp one, who is his student, Rabbi Yehuda, it's logical like you that you make a bar adama on hearts of palm. Why? He said, I'll bring you right. That's 9. Because regarding radishes, the halacha is shaseivel hakshus. A radish also, if you leave it, it'll get hard. Still you make a bar adama because right now it's edible. So that's going to be the same thing with hearts of palm. Shmuel rejects what Shmuel said to Rabbi Yehuda. But it's not the case. Snoin radishes not to inject in the pugla. People plant it to eat it when it's soft, when it's still a radish. So therefore you can make a bar adama. But regarding dikla, palm tree, not to inject to the kur, people don't plant it for the purposes of eating the hearts of palm. People plant it for the palm tree. And that's actually that's why halachically today they discussed it, because many hearts of palm they planted and they harvested for that, and therefore maybe it's going to be different. But therefore, says the Gemara, of the Kalsei Shmuel Rabbi Yehuda, so therefore even though Shmuel praised Rabbi Yehuda, Hilchas like Shmuel, halachas like Shmuel, that you're going to make a shahakal because radishes you plant for that. So even though it's going to end up getting hard, you'll make adama. But hearts of palm people don't plant for this. So even though now it's soft and it's edible, you're going to make a shahakal and not adama. And that's the difference between the Tanakh and Rabbi Yehuda regarding what their opinion is in Kur, not regarding if it's going to be considered as when you shulk a tigna, because everyone would agree that would work. Like we find it's not any less than the heart of an animal. The halach is going to be regarding the bracha, as we found this machlokes amaram. Now, Gufu, the Gemara goes back again to this teaching that we mentioned on Amud Aleph, which here we're going to talk about the measurements of what you need for a food item for the laws of Eruvin. So we have Amar Yehuda Rab. He had said kashuz regarding that of hops, the chaziz and the green grain. We said ma'arvim behen. You can make an air with it. Mavarchin aleim by you can make a bar adama. Now, the interesting halacha we'll learn that later on when we discuss at greater length. The laws of Erev Tchumen is that you need to have mazon shtei students. You need to have food for 2 meals. Now, the thing is that what that ends up meaning is that you need to have not necessarily a meal only of that thing. The meal could be, when you're having a meal, 2 meals worth, how much of that food would you eat in that 2 meals? And therefore that's the Gemara is going to say, kashus b'kama. How much hops would a person normally eat in 2 meals worth? Because the Gemara later on that payment base says you need to have 2 meals worth for an Erev. How much hops would be in 2 meals worth? So the Gemara says, because Rabbi Chil says, which we're going to quote shortly, where was the original teaching of Rabbi Chil, but just like he says, it's a handful. A handful of hops is how much a person would have in 2 meals worth, and therefore that's how much you need for your Erev. Now, Chaziz B'kama, how much green grain would be 2 meals worth? So Amarab Bar Tuvio by Yitzchak. Amarab, it says, Uzul Yosa di Ichari. It's the amount of the farmers, they used to go ahead and bind together like bundles of vegetables. However much that they use for a bundle, that's how much of the green grain would be how much a person would eat in 2 meals worth. Now, Amrav Chilke Bar Tuvi says, Ma'arvim B'kal, you can make an Erev with kalya. Now, kalya itself is a stalk of an herb, which is hard like a piece of wood. And he says you can make an Erev with it. Which the Gemara jumps on, says, B'kal, he's like, you make an Erev with kalya? What do you mean? It's like a piece of wood. Says, no, Ela rather b'yarka the kalya. You mean the green of the kalya, the green of the stalk, that's a vegetation that can be eaten. Therefore, you could actually make an Erev with that too. It says, how much of that vegetation would be eaten in 2 meals worth? Rabbi Chil, this was where the teaching was, like a handful. Now the Gemara teaches that Rabbi Yirmiyah went out to the villages to check on his grain, and when they went to see his day, the villagers asked from him, what's halacha? Could you make an Erev with moist beans? So he didn't know the halacha. So when he came to the Beis, they said to him, this would be beyond, he says. Now, you can make an Erev with moist beans. And it's something that's fit to be made there. Now, but how much? Here also, this was the source, like a handful. Now, the Gemara concludes with one more item. You can make an Erev with raw beets. Says Gemara, is that really so? But Rav Chizdi says, raw beets, is something that would kill a person. So it's obviously something that people don't eat. So the Gemara continues to talk about the Testament of that's talking about b'bashal b'lei bashal. That's talking about where it was cooked but not cooked, meaning it was halfway cooked. That would kill a person. But if it's completely raw beets, they are edible and you can make an Eruv with them. There's another version that Amar Rav Nuni says, you cannot make an Eruv with raw beets. Because Amar Chuzzi says, raw beets, killed a living person. Which Gemara says, but look, we see the people eat raw beets and they don't die. That's the what? Silke, right. Right. Maybe because it kills them. Right? So he says, you see people eat and they don't die. Says the Gemara, no, Hassam over there, when Rav Nuna said you could not make an Eruv, again, it's the same idea, was Bebashal Lebashal, which was the half raw beets. That's what could kill a healthy person. Which the Gemara actually concludes on this. Rav Nuna says, Tavashal Shal Trotten, a cooked dish of beets, Yafal Leib is good for the heart, it's good for the eyes, and Koshken Lebnei for sure it's good for the digestive tract. Which on Mabai, he qualifies, but Behudi Yosef Beitavi, this only if it was sitting on the stove where it cooks. The oven tuch and it's what's called iskakach. They're cooked very well, fully cooked until it gets like dissolved. When it's heating up, so it makes this sound tuch. That's what you hear in the oven. So that again, either fully cooked or raw, but halfway that's dangerous, and that wouldn't be valid for an Eruv. Something to discuss in today's daf, in Eruvin Daf Chavches. We continued from the previous one. We said, did Abaye really say that fish is going to be the difference between those two brises because it would be included in the first brise of Geduli Karka, that it grows from the ground? And therefore, that's like we said, that's the machlekes that we had from if you could use Meiser Sheni according to those two brises that say Klal Par the Klal. But Abaye says, he himself, and how can you say he says that's Geduli Karka? He says the following halacha. He says, if you eat putisa, which is an aquatic sheretz, you can get 4 lashes. If you eat a nemala, an ant, which is on the ground, 5. That of a tzir of a hornet in the ear, you can get 6. Now the problem is, why getting 4 if you tell me that patisa is a water sheretz? And you tell me like fish that grow in the water are geduli karka, so then it should be a sheretz ha'aretz, and it should get actually 7, not just 4. Obviously, Abaye does not hold it's a geduli karka. So rather, the Gemara says a different interpretation of Avina. The difference between those two different opinions is not regarding fish. They both exclude fish, and the ribuyi meuti ribuyi interpretation, they include fish. And that's what we said in the previous stuff. The difference between these two brides are going to be eifes, because birds are not vlad ha'aretz, because they actually were made from the rekak, from the mud, and therefore they're not from the vlad ha'aretz, but they are geduli ha'aretz, but they do come from the ground. Now, what's the difference? Why would one say that a klal practical has to have 3 characteristics, only one has to have only 2? So the yesod machlekes is the primary, when you have a klal practical, the first klal, or is the primary, the last klal? And that's going to be the difference if you say you need to have 2 or 3 criterion, because we need it to be in a prat. But the question is, if you say the klal klam is the primary, that's a klal prat, then it's only really what the prat tells us. The second klal is going to have a little bit more, but it has to have share 3 criteria. But if it's prat klal, the primary is the klal basra, so then prat klal, you're including everything. Most of all klal, that most of all prat, you're including everything. Klal klam is just diminishing. Oh, it has to have at least 2 of the criteria, but not more than that. And that's the difference why one would say eifes are included and the other one would say eifes are not included. We had a teaching of Rab that said you can make an Eruv with papuim, chalaglogias, and gudgonias, but you can't use chaziz and kafras. Now, regarding gudgonias, the Gemara says, wait a second, gudgonias, how can you make an Eruv with that? People don't eat it. So we said 3 interpretations. Either we're talking about the type that didn't get hard enough that the seeds started growing in it, or we're talking about for someone who has a lot of children. So although it's harmful for a person's a sperm, but it already has enough children. Or we're talking about even for someone that doesn't have children, because it's fit for someone who has children. As we learned in the halacha of the Mishnah, that a nazir can make with the ayin, or Yisrael can make with truma because it's fit for someone else. Or we're talking about a certain type, that of the median type, which is good quality. So though generally people will not eat the coriander of one type, but the garden variety, but that of the median type, they will eat, and therefore that's the type of the Eruv that he said you could make with. Now regarding the halacha of chaziz that he said you could not make with chaziz, the Gemara asked, what do you mean? Rav said that hops and chaziz, you could make an Eruv with it. So you see, you could. Now, parenthetically, the Gemara ultimately explains that kashus, hops, is a handful, and chaziz is how much the farmers make a bundle out of. That's how much would be for an Eruv of 2 sudas. And we said you make a bar paradama, which we're going to discuss shortly. But one thing is that you see, you could make an Eruv with it. That contradicts what Rav himself had said, that you cannot make an Eruv with chaziz. And we said you cannot say that when did he say you could use green grain is after he came to bubble, because, what I mean, you can't say that. Just like we find by beans and barley and all those things, that if you plant them for a vegetable, we say botla daitai, and actually the vegetable is going to be potter and the zara is going to be chayiv, So here also butler died. You can't say, oh, because in Bavla they do. Butler, that's not going to be significant enough to say, oh, change your opinion about chaziz is green grain that people don't usually eat. So how could he say that it is Erev when he said it's not an Erev? So the Gemara says, what's the type that you can make Erev? Is because the Gemara says the garden variety, which there everyone does eat that, and that's when the green grain you could, but general green grain you cannot. Now, actually, that halacha that he said you make it by pradama, the Gemara actually brought that it's actually two different opinions, actually machlekes. One opinion said that actually hops you make a hadama, and the green grain you make a shahakal. The other opinion says no, the opposite, that the green grain you make a hadama, and the hops you make a shahakal. Now, the reason why he said that by the hops you make a hadama is because that's the gemar peri. That's where it's finished already, and the chaziz is not the gemar peri, so you can't say boy pre hadama, it's not pre. The other opinion says no, to the contrary, hops make better because it grows from the ground. The green grain grows from the ground. The hops is ma'avir karabi, it grows from the ear because you see it doesn't grow from the ground. That's where you're going to make a shakal. Which the Gemara says no, it's not true because it is mi'ara. Because like we said, if you cut off the thorn bushes, the hops are going to die. Now then the Gemara still has one more thing that we have this green line over here. We're going to kavnias. That's why it's a little bit complicated. If you remember, we kept on going back to halachah regarding the unripe dates. So you said that you cannot make an error with that. The problem is, what we learned in the Brayso that says that the kavnias, the unripe dates, could be bought with kesav meiser. Okay, that's because ultimately it could be eaten, but it's going to be tamid tumas eichel. So you see that is considered a food item. So why would Rav say you cannot make an egg with it? And the Gemara rejected, says you cannot say that. Oh, here we're talking about the male type, where that's the gemar pri by the male trees, and that's why it's considered an eichel. But Rav is talking about the female ones, but kavnis are not the gemar, and therefore it's not considered as a pri. You can't say that because Rabbi Yehuda was in this brayso, and then he would not disagree. He does disagree. He wouldn't disagree and say that you'd be chayv meiser and you'd be pater for meiser. Rabbi Yehuda says in the brayso that you're pater for meiser. He wouldn't say you're pater for meiser because he himself says in a different brayso regarding pagi beis yomi, which are the unripe dates, that you are chayv meiser because that's all it grows. So obviously the brayso is not talking about the male ones, because if it was, then Rabbi Yehuda wouldn't say you're pater for meiser. Rather, the Gemara gives a different approach. Rather, the laws of tumas eichel is different because it's considered a food item. Why is it considered a food item? It's not ripe because you could sweeten it by the fire. Contrary to Eruvin, you're not going to say it because right now it's bitter. The Eruvin has to be usable for the Shabbos. And that's like we find Rabbi Yochanan by the bitter almonds, where according to the opinion that holds, whether when it's small, because there was two versions of that opinion, or big, that we said you can be chayv meiser, he says, wait, when it's big, how is it going to be chayv meiser? Because you can be muskin al deha, or so therefore consider it as a pre to be chayv meiser. That's the same halacha when say why tumas eichel is going to have the halacha of eichel, even though the Eruvin is not going to work. Then we have machlekes regarding hearts of palm. So in the brayso, Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakhama, they both seem to be saying the same thing. They both say the same halacha. What's the difference? So we had a havmin to say the difference between them is going to be when you stew it or when you fry it, and that's the difference between them. Rabbi Yehuda says like a piece of wood, so it's not going to be chayiv. But according to Tanakhama, it didn't say those words. Then it would be considered as eichel. And I think Gemara says no, you can't say that because everyone would hold that shalka b'tigna, even Rabbi Yehuda would hold that it would make it as eichel because we have a piece of leather that it's going to have too much eichel when you stew it. So you see for sure hearts of palm that was originally edible for sure would have it. So you can't say Rabbi Yehuda is saying that harika eitz that it wouldn't be considered as a chiyuv if you shalkai. So rather the Gemara concludes that no, the difference between them is regarding the laws of brach. As we have machlekes amarim of Rabbi Yehuda and Shmuel, that on the one hand maybe it's an uchla and you're going to say a bay adama because it's edible, or maybe you say that no, it's just ultimately it's going to end up becoming hard, so you're going to make a shahakal, and that's their machlekes. Those are two different opinions. And the Gemara concludes, yes, it is going to be shahakal, and one of the radishes the same thing that it's edible and then becomes hard, and you make a bay adama. No, because there by radishes people planted with that intention of eating as a radish, then you make a bay adama. But generally, like the hearts of palm, where you don't plant it for that, it will be shahakal even now when it's edible. We ended off by saying that you can make erev with raw beets, or if it's fully cooked, because both of them are edible when it's tuchtov, but not when it's partially, when it's bashal b'lei bashal, then it's not so edible, and then you're not going to be able to make an erev because that actually could kill a person, and therefore you wouldn't make an erev with such a thing. Thank you to any time for hosting us.